Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Build, and this is the second part of a two-parter weekend. Yesterday was Erebor, but today we are going to be building the tower from Tangled. That's right, the Disney movie Tangled, and the tower that Rapunzel's trapped in at the start of the movie. Right, so to start with, I wanted a nice lush green square to build on, so I set this biome here because normal grass is too dark. I wanted like a jungle coloured grass, so I set this biome to jungle, but the problem that left me with was a bunch of cats running around, so I just kind of had to ignore them for the time being and cracked on with the brush tool, plonking down some spheres of stone. Now if you know the tower I'm thinking of, then you'll realise that it's on top of a kind of like a small hill in the middle of a kind of a deep kind of ravine. There's walls to the left, to the right, to the back, to the front. There's cliffs all around this tower. It's kind of like a natural landscape prison that Rapunzel's kind of held in. So what I wanted to do first was to plonk down these stone spheres to put the tower on, and then once I had the rough size of the tower planned out, I could then set the canyon to be the right size according to the scale of the tower. So I mapped out the circle for the base of the tower here using sandstone. And once I was happy with the size, I came around the edge and started to plonk down the outer walls. Now I was just using stone spheres to make the cliffs for the landscape. And they do create these massive looming shadows, which are kind of quite iconic. So basically, using the World Edit brush tool, I went around the edge, just building upwards these huge sticks of stone spheres. Patching up the holes in the cliffs here and there where I made them. Now this did take me actually quite a long time to get the cliffs done. Not just because all I was doing was plonking down stone spheres either. The problem is, with spheres, they look spherical. You can see that I've basically just used spheres and it looks kind of obvious and unnatural. So once I was finished with all these stone spheres for the cliff edges, I had to run around with the smooth tool and just smooth up the edges to these mountains, the sides of these cliffs, just to make sure it looks more natural and more believable. Now I also used the smooth tool around the base as well to make sure that the grass climbed slowly up the sides of the mountains and the cliffs. Now you can see here that lush green. The problem was with the kind of main plains biome, the grasses are kind of dull, dark green. But I needed vivid colours because the movie itself is quite a vivid kind of masterpiece. So I needed the green that was, quite luminous. And this kind of ticked all the boxes for me. And again, just coming around the edge of the cliffs with the smooth tool, making sure the cliffs look nice and uneven and natural. Now I didn't finish up the cliffs completely, I just built basically a horseshoe, and I'd come around to the front of the canyon once I was closer to finishing. But for the time being I just smoothed up the last few cliff faces and set to work building the waterfall, because there's a waterfall that comes into this canyon right at the back and the right of it. But when I first put some water down, it kind of drifted all the way across the cliffs and it looked too thick. It looked like a big torrent. It looked like a massive river kind of gushing out over the mountains. And what I wanted was more like a small stream. So I dug a canal with a sphere tool set to air, bordered it with a little bit of stone, and put the stream back in, making sure it stuck to the canal I dug. Then once the stream was complete, I'd come back to the lake or the pond at the bottom of it later. I came around to the side of this kind of platform where the tower's going to be, and I gave it a kind of curve towards the cliff face. Just again using stone spheres and smoothing them with the smooth tool. Plonking down a region of stone there to get a bit more complete coverage. And then I started to dig out what would be the lake. It's not really a lake, it's not really a pond, it's like halfway between a pond and a lake. It's like a very large pond underneath the waterfall. And then I dug a kind of snaky river out towards the entrance to the canyon. I then smoothed the sides of this river, added some dirt to the side of this stone platform, smoothed that too, and then it was time to fill up the lake with a little bit of water. And there we are, looking more natural already. So then I came around to the stone platform again, threw down some more dirt, and then again smoothed it off, using smaller spheres this time, and then I turned pretty much all of the stone into dirt. Now it's looking a bit ugly at the moment, it's looking a bit brown and dull, so what I used was the green command to turn all the dirt into grass. And then again using the same command over at the dirt on the left to green that at a later point. And then it was time to put down some bone meal as well, because this place looks a bit plain, and so what you can do is you can put down bone meal and it just fleshes out an area, kind of just adds detail and picks out the edges. Then once I was pretty much happy with the landscape, I came around to the tower itself. Now I did do a lot of messing around with this tower. To start with, I wanted it the size that I'd mapped out, so I just began to build up for about 5 or 6 squares, 5 or 6 blocks, and then I went 1 block inside for a smaller cylinder. And the idea was to have it kind of like fat at the bottom, but then get thinner in the middle and then branch out back again and bulb at the top. And I wasn't quite sure on the size of this cylinder because it felt a bit too thick, it felt a bit too fat. But I kept building up anyway, and again went in 1 block more to make the cylinder even thinner, and began to build up again. And now with this, the final layer of the cylinder, there was only one thing left to do. I pointed my crosshair at the ground and just slowly began to build up. Now I'm not sure exactly how high I was going to go with this tower, because I didn't want it to be too high. You've got to remember that the cliff's on the outside, I can't have the tower top peeking over it. It's quite a small tower compared to the size of the canyon. And that was when I realised that, hang on a sec, I thought this tower was actually a little bit too thick. But to make it thinner, there was only one thing I could do, and that was fill in the cylinder itself with sandstone. And once I completely filled the cylinder with sandstone, I could slowly start to shear away at the edges and basically trim the radius, trim the diameter of this cylinder down a bit to make the tower a bit thinner and a bit more sleek. Coming around to the base at first, and slowly staggering it upwards, giving it a bit of a curve. Now you've got to be careful when you do detail like this, you can end up making the cylinder look a bit more square than you'd like to. And that was the case here, it was looking a little bit too square. But it didn't matter because at this point I was pretty much sure that I was going to have to actually clip the tower down even more. So what I did is I went to the top of the tower, measured out a smaller circle, and then again came down to the sides and began to trim away using World Edit at the sides of this tower to make it a smaller cylinder. And once I had a cylinder I was happy with the size of again, I came back down to the base and just made it a little bit fatter. Using sandstone and sandstone stairs to give it a bit more of a solid base. But again, the tower does need a little bit of a curve at the bottom, so I came down and added a few bits of detail that will make it look slightly curved. Then once I was happy with the tower itself, I started to build the top of the tower. Now, if you remember the pictures, or if you remember back to the movie, the tower has a kind of like bulbed top with a kind of curved peaked roof. So the first thing I got to work with was the dark wood here you see, picking out the detail of the first tower section. And like I said, the tower bulbs out, so I just made this kind of wooden circle, larger than the smaller circle, larger than the cylinder itself, larger than the tower itself. And just kept running around, building the framework of this tower, the edges, the structure of the tower, out of this dark wood. And what I'd do is I'd fill in later the middle with sandstone. Adding little window sections here and there, using wooden steps. And then, like I said, tinkering with the middle, filling in the middle with sandstone to give it that kind of little bit of depth and keeping it true to the movie. And here you can see the bottom of the tower, that detail kind of picked out with the supporting kind of wooden pylons holding up a larger outer ring of dark wood. Now it's time to build the bulb itself, so I built up with sandstone bricks, about 5 or so blocks, and then I began to build one of the window sections, because the way this tower is built is that one of the sides has a kind of balcony that leans out with a kind of sticking out section, and that's what this is here. Kind of toying around with wood, getting it looking right for the balcony section of the tower. Now this isn't red nether brick. What I'd actually done is I went into the texture pack and modified the red nether brick to be a bit more purple, just like the tiles in the tower in Tangled. And then I slowly began to build up this kind of curved peaked roof, starting shallow and then getting steep about halfway in. Using a mixture of the nether brick blocks, nether brick steps, and nether brick slabs. And there we go, you can see the completed rooftop, almost complete at least. I had to come around the edge and add a few half blocks. And also I had to do the spike on the roof. The spike on the roof is kind of like, I used cobblestone fences to get the spike, and I think a green wool block to get the kind of weird green ball that's impaled on the spike at the top of the tower. Now with the roof complete, I came around the sides and started to toy around with the windows. There's a lot of windows at the top of this tower. So I threw those in using again the dark wood and the dark wooden steps. But one important thing about the windows is they have a very kind of reflective glass texture on them. And the glass texture in this texture pack is just pretty much purely see-through. So to get the effect I wanted, what I decided to use was ice, and you'll see in a second just how that turned out. But also I needed some windows at the corner sections here, so using dark wood again, I kind of mapped out a few simple windows at the corners of the tower. And here you can see the ice going in, and check it out, doesn't it look like a pretty cool kind of glass substitute? It's light, it's cool blue, and it's pretty see-through, but it's got a very reflective sheen to it. And that's exactly what I was looking for from the windows of this tower. Now, the tower isn't just a pure tower, it's got a lot more to it than just sandstone. So what I did was I toyed around with the detail again, got it looking a bit thinner, in the middle, made it look like a bit more of a kind of sloped tower, a bit more of a curved tower. And then I came around the top with oak leaves, because the tower itself is kind of coated in kind of moss and vines. And so to get it looking like that, I kind of came around the edge with all kinds of leaves. I used birch, spruce, jungle, and oak to kind of get a mixed effect, a jumbled effect on how the leaves looked. And I just snaked around the tower, building up these kind of green hedges and foliage around the side of the tower to make it look a bit more forgotten, a bit more mysterious, and a bit more tangled. And the tower wasn't the only thing I used oak leaves on, because the valley itself is kind of a very dense kind of, it's got a lot of foliage in it. It's a very kind of dense, natural, rural area. So what I did was I came around the edge of the tower here, adding in some of the key unique trees. Like this tree that overlooks the river here, leans out over the river. Making this artificially, of course, with wooden logs, oak logs, and oak leaves. Then throwing down a few random trees here and there, but also putting down just some raw oak leaves to densify, to bring up the density of the foliage on the ground. Adding trees on the other side of the river as well. And bone meal is something that I'll come across again with and cover the right bank with. Now I made a slight mistake here. I was using the paintbrush command to put down hedges, but unfortunately when you put down oak leaves with a brush command, they'll just vanish sometime later as if they're on a tree that's decaying. So I had to come back and do those manually much later. But for the time being I was just putting down some dirt on the side of the mountain to have the grass climb slowly up the side of the cliffs. Then with a few more hedges on the ground and a few more bone meal patches put down, we were done with our Tangled Tower. Check it out. This is the tower from Tangled. It's where Rapunzel's held captive by the evil witch, and I can't say any more because spoilers, but if you haven't seen the movie, check it out because it's awesome. It's been a great pleasure to do this kind of as a build, because this tower has always been one of my favourite structures of anything anywhere. I mean, I've always loved how it looked inside the canyon, and I'm not sure I quite captured it, but I did the best I could inside Minecraft, that's for sure. But that's it from Let's Build this double whammy weekend. I've been Sjin, and if you enjoyed it, hit like and favourite and subscribe. But until next time, take care.